This is pretty unfortunate news if you happen to be a Spring Boot or Spring Framework user, or indeed a customer using any VMware products or services. Yes, Broadcom is cutting at least 2,800 jobs, including members of the Spring team. They've been laid off amongst many others at VMware following the $69 billion acquisition from Broadcom. Let's take a little look at how things unfolded and what this might mean for the Spring Framework going forward. So first things first, Broadcom completed their acquisition of VMware on the 22nd of November this year. From the press release, I want to read you a little snippet that will be interesting a little later on. Hock Tan, President and Chief Executive Officer of Broadcom, said, "We are excited to welcome VMware to Broadcom and bring together our engineering-first, innovation-centric teams as we take another important step forward, building the world's leading infrastructure technology company." Now, this bit's interesting. Broadcom has a long track record of investing in the businesses we acquire to drive sustainable growth, and that will continue with VMware for the benefit of the stakeholders we serve. Now, take special note of the last part, investing in businesses we acquire. Now, you can see from this tweet from a member of the Spring team that it looks like the acquisition is already taking its toll on the team. Oliver mentions, "Today is the saddest day I've had in more than 13 years with the Spring team," and you can see lots of interesting responses where people are offering their support. Oliver goes on to clarify that he himself is not affected personally, and in brackets, yet. So it looks like this is an ongoing process. He's not affected, but it looks like many of his colleagues are. He also went on to reassure users that the Spring development will continue. He talks about it being fine, but still a big hit if team members are let go. Now, it's not just the technical impact of losing highly skilled folks, but it's also the effect on morale of the people staying behind. I know because I've seen it happen multiple times. Now, before we continue, let's have a look at how we got here. The Spring Framework was set up by Rod Johnson and released under Apache 2.0 license in 2003. Yes, that's 20 years ago. VMware, the virtualization company, then acquired SpringSource, which was the company behind the Spring Framework, in 2009 for $420 million. The business model at SpringSource was to provide training and support. So why then would VMware buy a company supporting an open source project? Well, firstly, there's an application development business there to take on, but in addition to that, the acquisition meant that they could now enhance their cloud computing business with application development services. Integrating Spring with other products meant that they could offer a more complete service to customers. The VMware Tanzu line of business comprises a suite of products that allow for modern app development and infrastructure cloud operations on Kubernetes. This fits nicely with the development track of Spring Boot framework for developing microservices, many of which would end up running in Kubernetes on cloud. It also doesn't hurt for these tech companies to be associated with open source projects, benefiting from the halo effect and goodwill, not to mention that they can ensure that these products are well integrated into their paid offerings. Now, based on this article, it looks like the number of layoffs could be significant, threatening a noticeable impact on products, projects, and services. Quoting from the article, Broadcom announced back in May of 2022 that it would buy VMware for $61 billion and take on an additional $8 billion of the company's debt. And on November 22nd of 2023, Broadcom said that it had completed the acquisition. And it looks like Broadcom's first big move is going to be layoffs. According to warn notices filed with multiple states, Broadcom will be laying off at least 2,837 employees across multiple states, including 1,267 at its Palo Alto campus in California. It mentions that the actual number could be higher since not all layoffs require warn notices. They've mentioned that they contacted Broadcom for comment, and it goes on to say that VMware has around 38,300 employees worldwide. Now, coming back to the layoffs and the impact on the Spring team, you can see from tweets like this from Josh Long, a very well-known advocate of Spring, suggesting you hire folks that look like they've been laid off, but it's difficult to tell at the moment quite how many people from the Spring team have been let go. This CRN article quotes, "It's a combination of disgust and disappointment," said one let go VMware employee on Monday, of the mood inside the company as word of the layoffs rolled out. "For months we have not known what would happen, and we have been treated as disposable," the manager told CRN. "They sent out offer letters before the deal closed, but thousands didn't get them. VMware management didn't know what the status of various business units would be or the status of the thousands of employees who did not get the letters. Broadcom probably was working on a plan but didn't share much." This Reuters article mentions the chip maker will also review strategic options for two business units of VMware, Insider had reported on Wednesday, citing a leaked email from CEO Hock Tan to employees. There's a very interesting discussion on Reddit about the impact of the layoffs specifically on the Spring framework. There's many interesting points of discussion here, but one of the best comments in my opinion is this one here, where a user mentions that Spring is open source and the most heavily used framework in the Java ecosystem, period. The community will maintain it in a worst case scenario. And all in all, I'll have to agree with that sentiment. As far as the Spring framework is concerned, I really don't think there will be any major major risk there, but the pace of development might be somewhat hampered, but the community will likely rally and get the updates they need. That's the beauty of open source, and if there is any issue around the direction, it may well get forked and the development continue. Now, with all the issues you had with Java, Oracle, and the licensing debacle, well, you had OpenJDK, you could easily just continue using that. Don't forget that despite being backed by VMware, Spring was fundamentally an open source project, so there are huge amounts of community contributions, and I don't see why that wouldn't continue. Now, the interesting thing is that Oliver himself has spoken on this forum explaining that he is still there, but sad to have had to say goodbye to a few colleagues. Interesting use of the word few, which indicates that it was not a massive culling from the Spring team. Now, traveling back in history, it's quite interesting to look at many of the acquisitions that VMware themselves made. You can see on this link, which I'll include in the description below, you can see that they acquired Pivotal in December 2019 and a bunch of other companies which you might want to look through. All right, so whilst this is not great news for the employees affected or for clients who are worried about the impact on the products they use or the services they have contracted to use, it does not at all spell the end of the open source Spring framework. Seen in the wider backdrop of tech layoffs in 2023 and in the early mention of Broadcom finding savings if this acquisition was to go ahead, it's not that much of a surprise. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and if you do not want to be the last to know about important tech and industry news, make sure you hit subscribe. Thank you for watching.